Many people in our audience want to know about taxes, insurance, and finance issues. From our audience member, John, do you believe that economic development deals with tax credits, incentives, etc. are necessary and useful for Michigan's communities? What's your position on tax incentives?
Heck no. It's been one of those areas that's probably been the most frustrating policy area in my tenure in the Michigan Senate. Mackinac Center recently put out a survey of the records of legislators in regards to what they call crony subsidies. And so if you had a 100% rating, it means that you never saw a crony subsidy that you didn't like and you voted for every single one of them. And Bill Schuette got a 100% rating, Brian Kelly got a 95% rating, I got a 3.5% rating, and that was the best record of any state senator in 2 decades. And by the way, of that 3.5%, one of them was for a place that they were counting on that subsidy because a new company had bought that company. And if I would have said no to it, the people that were already working at that company, so it wasn't an incentive to set up a new shop, people that were already working there would have lost their jobs, and I couldn't do that in that case. But that's where the 3.5 comes from. But I believe that the best approach to economic development is broad-based economic development. I'm a management consultant for 11 years. My job's been to go off and turn around business operations for a lot of different companies. And if you want to turn them around and get them into a job growth mode, the best way to do is lower the total cost of business operations, and you can do that by lowering the cost of government, which means eliminating state personal income tax. You can do it by lowering the cost of health care, which is something I've been a big proponent, and not just statewide, but nationally recognized by Forbes.com on free market healthcare solutions, and then lowering the cost of electricity by promoting energy choice, where you can get 10 to 20% less on your electricity rates than you would under the regulated utility market. So that's the way to incentivize economic development. I'm opposed to about $1 billion in handouts that we give every single year towards what I believe is more cronyism.
Steve?
In all likelihood, sometime over the next 4 years, we're going to probably be back into a recession.
Oh, don't call that out by faith.
How would you prepare the state so that it's ready if the economy does a downturn in the next 4 years?
Diversification, and the way you get diversification is not by mandating a diverse portfolio. A lot of top-down central planners like to go off and do that. The way you get that diversification is actually by getting government out of the way. You'll notice that every time they put together an incentive program in Lansing, it's like, okay, this year we're going to incentivize films. Next year, now we're going to incentivize batteries. Oh, now we're going to incentivize data centers. They try to play SimCity with our state and try to micromanage everybody's lives. Now, the way to do this and the way to incentivize it and prepare us for the future is to let people be driven by their own passions and in regards to what they want to pursue in the business realm. And that's when you get the biggest success stories. That's when you get somebody like a Henry Ford kicking off into some area that never was really, it wasn't an industry before. The auto industry wasn't a real industry, if you would, before he got engaged on it. We want to incentivize all those new ideas, and the way to do that is by getting the government out of the way.
Senator, would you roll back Michigan's income tax, or would you eliminate it altogether?
Eliminate it altogether, and it's about a $9.7 billion gap, and I've got a practical, milestone-based approach to get us all the way down to zero. And by the way, when you eliminate the state personal income tax, you eliminate the senior pension tax, and you also eliminate the debate about fairness between people with 401k style plans and pension taxes, because neither one of them are taxed on income. And so this is not something you do with just one bill and you say, poof, income tax gone. No, this is something where you identify tangible expense-based milestones that once you achieve that milestone, you ratchet it down. Once you achieve the next one, you ratchet it down. And I believe we can get all the way down to zero by the end of my tenure as governor.
Senator Colbeck, could you give us a few of the highlights of replacing that $9.7 billion that you'd be taking away from the state in income?
First of all, everybody needs to know I'm not cutting schools, I'm not cutting police and fire, all the usual red herrings everybody throws out on this stuff. Where you start is number one at the single largest line item in our state budget, and that's Medicaid. Out of our $56.7 or so billion budget, $18 billion of it goes to Medicaid. In that line item, we actually kicked off a pilot that I got into the state budget last year for direct primary care-based Medicaid pilot. It offers the opportunity to save over 20% on the cost of Medicaid, and it does so while actually getting Medicaid enrollees better care. So here's a case where we can actually reduce expenses by improving services. well, 20% of $18 billion, about $3.6 billion. Already you're at 6.1. Then we go back to what we were talking about in economic development. And that $1 billion for Michigan Strategic Fund, Michigan Economic Development Corporation, another $1 billion off the top. Now we're down to $5.1 billion. Now if we go into economic growth, we get into the case where if we got 500,000 new private sector jobs through a pro-growth attitude here in the state again, like we've done over the last 7.5 years, now we got another $1.9 billion net to the positive with the elimination of need for government assistance plus increased sales tax revenue, use tax revenue, property tax revenue.
What role would criminal justice reform play in that savings?
Reduction of recidivism could actually reduce it by another $300 million. I mean, as you know, it's our largest line item for general fund money in the state budget, so it means it's the most fungible money we have in the state budget. So that is an opportunity to significantly reduce the costs of...
Have you thought about how you reduce recidivism?
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons I'm on the Criminal Justice Policy Commission, is to identify the different data streams that identify what programs are working to reduce recidivism and which ones are not working. And I've actually been pretty systematic about identifying. Matter of fact, unfortunately, the governor vetoed one of my bills to get a lot of that data out into the system, but ultimately, there's a lot of particular faith-based programs that have been shown to cost very little up front, if anything, and actually reduce recidivism down in the single digits. So that's one way of going off and approaching it. And whatever the program is, if you can show how effective it is at keeping people out of this rotating door of prison, we can drastically reduce the cost of our correction system.